She held her champagne flute like a mic, the kind of woman who mistook confidence for cruelty. "This is my ex," she said to the crowd, loud enough for the back row to hear. "No degree, no future. But hey, he still knows how to open a wine bottle." Laughter broke across the room. Not roaring, but cruelly polite. Co-workers exchanged smirks. Her boss even gave a pity nod. And her parents? Her father barked a wheezy chuckle and elbowed his wife, who didn't even try to hide her grin. I just stood there, one hand in my pocket, the other holding a glass of sparkling rose that tasted like medicine and regret. She didn't even look at me when she said it. That was the part that stung. I wasn't just being mocked. I was being erased. The woman I married, the one who once cried in my arms over student loan rejection letters, now couldn't say my name unless it came with a punchline. I looked around that upscale hotel ballroom. Polished floors, fake smiles, ego-slick conversation, and felt like I'd stepped into an alternate universe. One where kindness was weakness and loyalty was a joke. I waited 3 long seconds, counted them in my head, slowly. 1, 2, 3. Then I raised my glass. Not in toast, but like a soldier saluting the battlefield before walking off it. I locked eyes with her, finally forcing her to acknowledge me. Her face twitched, just slightly. I said, "Cheers. You'll never see me again." And I walked. No dramatic scene. No shattered glasses. Just the sound of my shoes on parquet, muffled by the fading music and the awkward shuffle of the DJ trying to transition from jazz to top 40. The party resumed within 10 seconds. That's all it took for a decade of sacrifice to be folded into a joke and forgotten. She didn't follow. Of course she didn't. I could feel her relief before I even hit the parking lot. That moment, that was my graduation. No tassel, no ceremony, just the death of illusion. And I left behind everything. The party, the marriage, the version of myself that stayed silent when I should have screamed. You'd be surprised how quickly a man can rebuild when no one's watching him anymore. But before I go on, if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed, consider it. Over 97% of you tune in without hitting that button, and honestly, that support helps us keep going. No fluff, just truth. Like this. So anyway, I got in my car. No bags. Just my phone, my wallet, and an envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. The pen was already in the glove compartment. Signed. Sealed. I drove to the nearest 24-hour mailbox and dropped it in. Inside, a quitclaim deed and copies of 2 notarized forms I'd been quietly preparing since April. You see, she thought that promotion party was the beginning of her next chapter. She had no idea it was the end of mine. What she never noticed, because she never looked, was that the man she mocked at her side hadn't been her anything for months. I'd already removed myself from the mortgage, already rerouted my paycheck, already handed over the keys to a future she didn't deserve. And the most insulting part? I was never mad. I wasn't even surprised. I was tired. Tired of being her supporting actor in the play she wrote about herself. Tired of sitting at dinner parties with finance bros and marketing execs while she introduced me as the guy who dabbled in construction. Tired of being a ghost in my own life. She called me her ex like it was a joke. She had no idea how right she was. She would later claim it was just a joke, that I was too sensitive. But there was a tone in her voice that night. Too crisp, too clean. That wasn't a slip. That was a knife. And I didn't flinch. I never went back to the house. Not even once. I didn't take my tools, my clothes, not even the watch she gave me for our 5th anniversary. I let her keep it all. But what she kept, she'd pay for. And that party, that wasn't her triumph. It was her warning. She just didn't hear it. She stumbled in around midnight, the kind of drunk where your shoes don't quite touch the floor and everything feels just a little too loud. The Uber driver had made small talk about the big night, and she chuckled, still basking in the afterglow of attention. In her mind, she was glowing. Promotion secured. Applause earned. And that offhand joke about her ex had landed perfectly. She assumed I'd gotten over it the second I stepped out. I always did. But the house was too quiet. She called out my name. Once, then again. No answer. She kicked off her heels by the door, stumbled into the kitchen, expecting the light above the sink to be on. My routine, but it wasn't. She thought maybe I'd just gone to bed early. She passed the dining table. No wine glass. No dishes. Not even a stray coaster. Then she noticed the hallway, how clean it looked. Too clean. When she reached the bedroom, the chill finally hit. My drawer? Empty. The one with my socks, my watches, my old Cubs t-shirt? Gone. She swung open the closet, and for the first time in years saw the left side without clutter. No jackets, no belts, no work boots, just air. She stood there for a second, processing. Then she noticed the smell, or rather, the lack of one. I always wore the same aftershave. A subtle cedar, she once said, reminded her of road trips. It used to linger on her pillow. That night, the pillow smelled like nothing. She turned to the nightstand. That's when her breath caught. A single sheet of paper lay there. No envelope, no flourish. Just my handwriting in blue ink, sharp and deliberate. No degree, no future, no longer yours. Underneath the note, 2 more papers. One was a bank statement, just the last page, showing the final balance withdrawal. Not a huge amount, but enough to show every joint account had been closed or split. My portion had been moved. No pending charges, no linked cards, just done. The second paper? The quitclaim deed. Signed, witnessed, notarized. I gave her the house. Correction, I gave her all of it. The equity, the upkeep, the property taxes, the fading paint job she kept promising to get someone to fix. It was hers now, fully, legally, irrevocably. She sat down, half sober and very suddenly cold. To her, the joke at the party was nothing more than a jab. Something she'd laugh about the next day over brunch with her coworkers. Maybe she'd send a photo from the party to the group chat. He actually left. Like, walked out. They'd laugh again, reassure her. Call me dramatic. But this wasn't dramatic. This was precise. She opened the drawer to her nightstand, looking for her phone. Maybe to call me, maybe just to feel less alone. But instead, she found something else. The small velvet pouch I'd once used to store my wedding ring. Empty. The pouch sat there like a question she didn't know how to answer. She checked the bathroom next, almost frantic now. Toiletries? Gone. Razor. Toothbrush. Floss. Even the clippers I always left in the drawer crooked. All gone. And then she did what people do when their panic is trying to outpace their ego. She laughed. Just once. Short and high-pitched, like a balloon popping in the next room. Then silence again. She walked back into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up the note. She read it again. No degree, no future, no longer yours. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. She started to shake. She thought I'd come crawling back. That I'd cool off, return quietly like I always had after her jabs. Maybe she thought I'd sulk, sleep on the couch for a few nights, wait for her to pretend to apologize. What she hadn't expected, what her mind simply refused to compute, was that I'd been leaving long before she made the joke. She just gave me a standing ovation for it. She started with a text. Just one. Okay. Can we talk? No reply. So she waited an hour, paced the kitchen twice, reheated coffee she wouldn't drink, and sent another. Seriously, where are you? This isn't funny. Then came the calls, 2 the first night, 5 the next morning, a dozen by lunch. Straight to voicemail. The line didn't ring. Not once. By the 3rd day, she used a different number. A friend's phone. It rang once, then voicemail again. Now she was pacing with purpose. Not grief. Not regret. Just something that felt like dread dipped in confusion. It wasn't like before, when I'd walk off for an hour to cool down and return before dinner. This wasn't sulking. This wasn't me. Or maybe it was, and she just never noticed. Her mother came over with wine and sympathy laced in judgment. You know how sensitive he is, she said, swirling a glass she didn't sip. He's just making a scene. It'll blow over. But even her mother's voice had less bite than usual. Maybe because she'd seen the quitclaim deed. Or maybe because when I left, I didn't just leave. I erased myself with the efficiency of someone who'd already done the grieving. Still, her mother tried. You two always get through these things. He just needs time. Men hate being embarrassed in public. That word, embarrassed, felt like a paper cut across the tongue. Even her mother couldn't pretend it had been a joke anymore. A week in, she drove to my old office. Just walked in wearing her best, I'm still married to him face, asking for me at reception like I was late for lunch. The receptionist gave a polite but practiced smile. Oh, he's no longer with us. What do you mean, no longer? She asked. Too loud, too quick. He resigned. About 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. The receptionist's smile stayed frozen. Yes, it was processed before the 15th. Said he was relocating. Something about restructuring priorities. Left a nice email for the team. Her hands started to tremble, so she shoved them into her coat pockets like she was cold. She left without asking for the email. That would have made it too real. Back in her car, she pulled up their shared bank account app. The one she hadn't checked in months, because why would she? I handled all that boring stuff. The login still worked, but the numbers didn't. The primary joint account now had only her name. My name, removed. The savings account, gone. Split. My portion moved into a different institution entirely, the name of which she didn't recognize. The mortgage autopay? Still there, but in her name only. And the transaction history showed it all. My withdrawal processed at 10:42 p.m. The exact moment she'd lifted her glass and called me her ex. She stared at the timestamp. Froze. It wasn't rage. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. I hadn't just walked out. I had vanished with surgical precision. That's when she finally said it out loud to no one. Oh my God, he's gone. And then her stomach turned, because she didn't even know where gone was. She opened Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Nothing new. I hadn't posted in months, maybe more. She scrolled back, hoping to find something. A trip, a message, even a comment she'd ignored. But there was only stillness, like I'd never existed. And that was the moment she realized. I didn't leave the house. I left her life, and I took the future with me. It was a Thursday when the tag popped up. She was mid-scroll, half watching some true crime rerun, half snooping through the pages of mutual friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Then, ding, a notification from someone she barely remembered. Ashley Stanford had tagged her in a photo. Ashley, that fake smile sorority relic who once borrowed a dress and forgot to return it. They hadn't spoken since the wedding. So why now? She tapped the notification, expecting some old memory res hair or cringe wedding group photo. But no, this was new. The image was from a hotel ballroom somewhere in Austin. A sleek, brushed gold backdrop, the kind used at tech conferences or investor summits. Everyone in the picture wore name badges, crisp suits, high heels, that odd networking glow of people pretending to enjoy warm champagne. And there he was, standing dead center, sharp navy suit, hair neat, beard trimmed tighter than she ever remembered. Confident posture, not the slouched patience she was used to, the one he wore like armor during years of being the plus one. No, this man stood like he owned the room. His nameplate read, Daniel Wade, Director of Acquisitions, Langford Holdings. She blinked, zoomed in, no ring. Her throat dried. She hadn't even known he was in Austin, or in acquisitions, or at Langford. Hell, what even was Langford Holdings? And since when did he go to summits? Then she noticed the woman beside him. She wasn't holding his hand. She didn't need to. She just stood there, effortless and elegant, in a deep green silk dress that caught the light like glass. Her hand rested gently on Daniel's arm. Not possessive, comfortable, familiar. She was the kind of woman who didn't have to introduce herself. The kind who didn't laugh too loud or too soon. The kind who never once called her husband no future, in public or private. And her smile? It wasn't forced. It wasn't smug. It was content. Ashley had captioned the post. Amazing panel at the Langford Summit tonight. Shout out to Daniel Wade, brilliant insights on mid-market verticals. And who is this stunning woman? Hashtag power couple vibes. Power couple. The words twisted like a knife. Her thumb hovered over Ashley's name. Part of her wanted to message, ask innocently, "Oh my God, Daniel, where was this?" But she didn't, because she knew the answer wouldn't bring comfort. It would bring confirmation that he wasn't just surviving. He was thriving, and not in some rebound cliché way. No gym selfies, no spiritual retreats, no overpriced leather jackets. This was a clean, quiet ascent. The kind you build in silence while the world's too busy laughing at your back. She checked his LinkedIn. Dated. Professionally shot headshot. Crisp bio. Strategic acquisitions executive with 10+ years in asset development. Director at Langford Holdings. Champion of sustainable market growth. 10 years? He'd made her career look like a game of dress-up. She stared at the green dress woman a little longer. Couldn't figure out who she was. Not tagged. No name. Which somehow made it worse, because that meant the woman wasn't showing off. She didn't need to. She was just there in his life, in the life she thought would freeze the moment he walked out. She dropped her phone on the couch, palms sweaty, heart doing that uneven gallop it did when she missed a step on the stairs. She reached for the throw blanket, curled into herself like the silence might offer a reason. She whispered, "What the hell?" But the mirror in the hallway answered back, in its own way. The same hallway where she once hung a photo of them from their second anniversary, when he still wore department store shirts and smiled with his eyes. That photo? She'd replaced it 6 months ago, with a framed certificate from her company's top team lead award. He used to joke that her plaques had more shelf space than his tools. She used to laugh. Now, she couldn't remember what his laugh sounded like. And somewhere, hundreds of miles away, he was laughing again. Just not with her. She heard the doorbell mid-morning, just as she was stirring instant coffee and pretending to work from home. The party was over a week behind her now, but the aftermath still clung to her like damp clothing. No word from Daniel, no explanation, just silence and headlines in her head. She kept checking her email as if an apology might arrive through the spam filter. Nothing. The man at the door wore a charcoal gray blazer and a practiced smile. "Legal courier for Mrs. Wade?" he asked, already extending a padded envelope. She frowned. "I'm not." But she was, at least on paper, legally. For now. She took the envelope and signed his tablet. The man didn't linger. No small talk. No explanation. Just a nod, a pivot, and gone. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds longer than she needed to, staring at the dull neighborhood she used to think was charming. Then she tore open the envelope. The cover letter was polite, formal, cold. Per the attached and finalized quitclaim deed, the property at 1147 Ashcroft Lane is now solely under your ownership and liability, relinquished in full by Daniel Wade as of date. She exhaled. Some part of her had clung to the fantasy that maybe this was temporary. Maybe he'd want the house back. Maybe he left it as a cruel joke, something to reclaim when he returned and made her crawl. But no, he had released it. No strings, no conditions, except, of course, the other documents. The next page was a home inspection report, dated 4 months ago. The kind of thing you get before refinancing or exiting. It listed structural damage, water ingress near the back deck, and, highlighted in red, a deteriorating roofline that had already triggered a pending insurance claim. She blinked. There was a yellow sticky note attached with an asterisk. Pending claim denied due to late filing. Next came the contractor invoices. 3 of them. One from a roofing specialist, one from a foundation repair company, and one from a plumbing outfit she'd never heard of. Total combined? Just north of $26,000. All labeled open balance. All addressed to Mrs. Daniel Wade. The last page was from the city's code enforcement department. It cited the house for non-compliance with outdoor runoff mitigation. In plain terms, the gutters weren't just leaking. They were draining into a neighbor's yard and had already resulted in a formal complaint. And guess who the responsible party was now? Not Daniel. Not the man who had planned his escape with surgeon's precision. It was her. She sat down at the kitchen island and felt the marble press against her spine like a cold slap. The same island she'd once bragged about installing, calling it open concept elegance. Daniel hated that phrase. He said it sounded like a BuzzFeed article disguised as design advice. And now it was hers. All of it. The failing gutters. The rotting shingles. The leaks beneath the guest bathroom that she'd ignored because he always took care of that stuff. The bank account was still stable, for now, but the weight of it all began to settle in like a slow poison. He didn't just leave her the house. He left her the shell of a house. A honey trap, gift-wrapped, with a bow made of debt and silence. She stood abruptly, knocking her untouched coffee across the countertop. It soaked the edge of the quitclaim deed. She didn't even reach to clean it. Instead, she grabbed her phone and opened her calendar. Yes, there it was back in April. A note from Daniel. Roof inspection 3 p.m. Meet with Evan. She hadn't shown up. Said she had a client call. He'd waved it off, like he always did, and went alone. Quietly, dutifully, while she took a fun quiz with her coworkers to see what type of management style matched their Enneagram. She was a challenger, apparently. Now the only challenge was figuring out how to fix a foundation on a salary that barely covered her car lease and Botox appointments. She laughed once. Sharp and ugly. The kind of laugh that made her stomach ache. She had won the house. But it wasn't a prize. It was an obituary. And she'd just signed her name to it in permanent ink. The first call went to his brother, Caleb. She waited until Sunday evening, thinking that maybe, just maybe, enough time had passed for civility. He answered after the second ring, voice flat. Hey, Caleb. I know this is weird, but I just wanted to ask if you've heard from Daniel. Silence. She forced a light chuckle. I know he's mad, but I was hoping. Yeah. He cut in, calm but razor-edged. He's mad. You mocked him in front of 60 people. She froze. It was a joke. Everyone was drinking. He knew I didn't mean it like. You embarrassed him, Caleb said. In public. And in front of your parents, no less. You don't come back from that with a phone call, Rachel. Click. No goodbye. No take care. Just a dial tone and the metallic taste of rejection sitting heavy on her tongue. So she tried his aunt next. Carol, the peacemaker. The woman who made centerpieces out of pine cones and called everyone darling. If anyone could smooth things over, it would be Carol. But Carol didn't pick up. Instead, Rachel got a text 15 minutes later. He's with people who respect him now. Let's leave it at that. She stared at the screen. Thumb hovered. No response would make it better. She deleted the number. Then came the phone call she'd been dreading, her own father. She'd assumed he'd be mad at Daniel. Walking out of a party like that, she imagined him growling. Making a scene. That was how her father handled everything. Blame the quietest person in the room. But when he finally answered, his voice was colder than the last time she forgot his birthday. Ratch. Hey, Dad. A long pause. I guess you're calling to talk about what happened, she offered, forcing contrition into her tone. Another pause. You shouldn't have said that, he muttered. You humiliated the boy, right in front of us. Boy. The word landed like a slap. Her father had never once called Daniel that. Not even early on when he'd been skeptical of the handyman with no degree. I was kidding, Dad. You laughed too. Remember? He didn't reply. I mean, come on. He's always been so sensitive. That man built your garage with his own hands, he said, voice rising just slightly. Held your mother's hair back when she got food poisoning at your engagement party. And I saw the look in his eyes that night. That wasn't a joke to him. She almost said it wasn't supposed to be. But what came out instead was silence. You crossed a line, he said. Her mother didn't even speak. Just stayed in the background during the call, fiddling with silverware or some project designed to look like she wasn't listening. When Rachel finally asked, Is Mom there? The silence was answer enough. At work, it got worse. First, it was the glances, the side eyes at the coffee machine. Then came the whispers, hushed laughs behind cubicle walls. She could feel it like static on her skin. During lunch, one of the newer analysts, the perky one with a too-wide smile, stopped her near the elevator and said, Hey, random question. Are you, still married or just in denial? Rachel blinked. What? The analyst backpedaled instantly. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. Someone said, never mind. I didn't realize it was a thing. The doors opened. Rachel stepped in. Alone. She didn't eat lunch that day. In the break room, someone had left a newspaper folded open on the table. The business section. Not something she usually touched. But today, she glanced. There he was again. A photo. Taken at the summit, captioned. Langford Holdings' new acquisitions director predicts aggressive growth in Q3. Same navy suit. Same quiet smile. Same woman in green. This time, the photo included a quote from him. People underestimate quiet builders. Until one day, they look up and realize who laid the foundation. The word foundation felt like a boot to the chest. She closed the paper and left the room. By the time she got home that night, her inbox had 6 new emails. All junk. None from him. And for the first time in her life, Rachel didn't feel like the one people whispered about behind her back. She felt like the punchline. It arrived on a Wednesday. No courier this time. Just a plain white envelope slid through the front door slot like it had been hand-delivered by someone who didn't want to be seen. No return address. No markings. Just her name written in neat, deliberate handwriting she hadn't seen in weeks, but could still recognize in a heartbeat. She didn't open it right away. She stood in the foyer, staring at it like it might explode. Something about the weight of it felt wrong. Not heavy in ounces, heavy in meaning. Heavy in silence. Eventually, she carried it to the kitchen. Set it on the island. Walked around it 3 times before finally sitting down. She ran her finger under the flap, careful not to tear it. Inside was a single sheet of unlined paper, handwritten, slanted slightly to the left, clean lettering. He hadn't rushed this. She unfolded it. One sentence. I spent 10 years building a future around you. You spent 10 seconds destroying it. That was it. No greeting. No signature. No closure. Just a summary. Taped to the back was a photo. She stared at it, breath caught somewhere between lungs and throat. Someone at the party must have taken it. Maybe a coworker. Maybe one of those event photographers who captures candids that aren't candid at all. It was mid-toast, her mouth open, laughing, head tilted back slightly, eyes bright with whatever poison passed for charisma that night. Her parents in the background, blurred but grinning, and next to her Daniel, still, quiet, holding a glass halfway to his lips, not smiling, not even looking at her, looking past her, frozen in time like he had already stepped outside himself, like he had already left. She hadn't seen this photo before, didn't even know it existed, but the second she looked at it, something inside her twisted, because in that still frame she saw it. The moment everything changed, the second the lights dimmed inside him. And worse, he had remembered everything, every frame, every laugh, every flick of the wrist that turned him from husband to punchline. Her fingers trembled as she held the image. She thought back to the way she'd said it. This is my ex, no degree, no future. She had chuckled before the words were even out, like it was just another line at another party. She thought it was harmless, just a little jab, a little public reminder that she had risen, that he was lucky to stand beside her. But in the photo, he looked like a man who had realized he wasn't standing beside anything anymore. He was standing underneath something, holding it up, and he'd just let go. She looked down again at the letter. 10 words. That was all it took to say what she couldn't say in 10 years. She whispered, I didn't mean to, but even the air didn't believe her. She laid the photo flat on the table, smoothing it with the palm of her hand. Like that could change it. Like maybe, if she pressed hard enough, the moment would shift. He would smile. She would soften. The words would come back into her mouth before they escaped. They didn't. What stayed instead was the echo of his silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for forgiveness, doesn't beg to be understood. The kind that says, you don't deserve the sound of my voice anymore. She kept staring at that moment, her own face laughing, oblivious, and his, focused, cold, already calculating. That was the photo he chose to send her. Not the wedding, not the vacations, not the anniversary dinner she half ignored. That one. The moment where she mistook humiliation for wit. Where she turned the man who held her life together into a cautionary tale. And smiled doing it. She stood up slowly, walked to the living room, and placed the letter and the photo on the coffee table. Sat down across from them. For a long time she didn't move. Eventually, she realized the music from her phone had stopped playing. She hadn't even noticed. But the image kept playing in her head. Over and over. Like punishment. No, like proof. It came in the mail like a wedding invitation, thick envelope, gold-embossed lettering, the kind of stationery that smelled expensive and carried weight before you even opened it. The return address said Langford Holdings. That caught her eye. She sliced it open with the same letter opener they'd used on their tax returns back when everything still had we in it. Inside was a folded invitation on cream cardstock. Langford Holdings Annual Gala, honoring strategic growth and new beginnings. Benefactor guest list enclosed. She blinked. Down the list of names, executives, donors, foundation heads. There it was, Rachel Wade. She turned the card over, expecting some kind of catch. A mistake. A misprint. Maybe he hadn't meant to include her. But then she saw the smaller insert. Formal attire. Guest of honor to speak at 8:30 p.m. Her hands began to sweat. It had been weeks. Not a single text. No apology. No final blow. Just silence. And now this? She held the card like it might crumble. Her thoughts ran wild. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the bridge back. Maybe he wanted her to see the progress, to humble himself, to talk. Not in anger, but in closure. Maybe he missed her. That night, she stood in front of the mirror longer than she had in months. Tried on 3 dresses. Settled on a navy one he used to compliment back when compliments still happened. She tied her hair up, then down, then back again. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She arrived early. The venue was a downtown hotel, the same one where they once celebrated his birthday with stale champagne and too many coasters. But tonight it was transformed. Silver linens. crystal chandeliers, name placards instead of sticky notes. She gave her name at the front. The attendant smiled and handed her a program and table number. Table 41, she read. She blinked. That was far. She looked at the floor plan. The stage was up front. Tables 1 through 10 formed a crescent around it. Hers? Back by the bar. Next to a coat rack and near the waitstaff station. She felt it then. Not a mistake. Not an olive branch. This was an invitation to watch. Not to participate. As the ballroom filled, she scanned every face. He hadn't come out yet. She sipped a flute of something dry and overpriced and tried to make small talk with the couple beside her. Both venture capitalists from Denver who kept confusing her with someone named Melissa. And then the lights dimmed. A spotlight bloomed across the stage. Applause rose like a wave. There he was. Daniel. Confident. Crisp. The same navy suit. No tie. Just enough looseness to say, I'm the authority here, and I know it. The room quieted. He stepped up to the mic. Thank you for being here tonight, he began. This year was about transformation. About deciding what to carry forward and what to leave behind. His voice was steadier than she remembered. Fuller. Deeper. She felt every syllable like a heartbeat. I spent a long time letting other people define my worth, he continued. I let myself shrink to fit their comfort. I thought loyalty meant invisibility. I thought love meant silence. She inhaled sharply. He wasn't looking at her. Not once. Not even a glance toward the back. He was locked in, speaking to the room, to the investors, to the donors. But somehow, still to her. Sometimes, he said, you have to lose everything to see what was never yours in the first place. There it was. The room nodded along. Some even clapped. He smiled. But this isn't a story about loss. It's a story about growth. About second chances. Not to return, but to restart. And she knew then, he hadn't invited her as a guest. He'd invited her as a witness. To sit in the shadow of everything he'd become. To hear firsthand the words he never had to say directly. To see what a future looks like when you're no longer part of it. When the applause ended, he stepped down into a sea of well-wishers, backslaps, handshakes, camera flashes. She stayed seated. Table 41 might as well have been Antarctica. No one looked her way. No one introduced themselves. No one asked who she came with. She watched him laugh with strangers, pose for photos with executives, exchange hugs with people who had earned his trust. And the woman in green, she was there too, standing not beside him this time, but next to the Langford CEO, laughing, relaxed, like she belonged, like she wasn't borrowing the moment. She was part of it. Rachel turned her program over, trying not to wrinkle it in her fist. There was no comeback waiting for her at the end of the night. No backroom reunion. No soft speech under the chandeliers. Just the echo of applause. And the growing realization that she'd mistaken an invitation for a lifeline. It wasn't. It was a mirror. And it showed her everything she was no longer allowed to touch. She waited until the crowd had thinned. Not out of strategy but fear. He stood near the stage, surrounded by people whose shoes cost more than her monthly car payment. Each of them leaning in like his approval was currency. He laughed. He nodded. He clapped hands and thanked donors like he'd been doing it his whole life. He moved like someone at home in his own skin. She waited behind a column draped in gauze-like fabric, pretending to read the gala brochure as if it contained a hidden map back to the version of him who used to fall asleep with his head in her lap. Her palms were damp. Her throat dry. For the first time in forever, she didn't know what she would say. She thought he'd see her before she reached him. He didn't. He was mid-handshake with a woman in a tailored suit when she finally stepped forward. Daniel. His head turned at the sound of his name. The smile stayed for half a second, frozen, confused. Then it dropped, gracefully like a curtain at the end of a show. You came, he said flatly. No warmth. No invitation. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to see you. Hear what you had to say. I think you heard enough, he said. She looked around. The room had shifted. Less laughter now. Fewer eyes. But the ones still watching knew. They didn't need names to sense it, the tension, the thread stretched too tight. I made a mistake, she whispered. That night. I wasn't trying to hurt you. It was just a joke, he finished, still not looking at her, eyes scanning the room. She stepped closer. I was trying to be funny. I didn't mean. You didn't think? he said, finally meeting her eyes. And there it was. The look that said she was no longer dangerous, just irrelevant. He took a slow breath. That moment made everything clear, he said quietly. You never respected me. You tolerated me. No, she said too fast. I loved you. He tilted his head. You loved having someone who stayed, who cleaned up after your ambition and called it support. That's not fair. But it's accurate. The hum of a nearby jazz band seemed suddenly too loud. She felt her chest tighten, her fingers curl inward. She looked at him, really looked, and realized he hadn't come here to gloat. He hadn't expected her to be here at all. He wasn't performing. He wasn't playing a role. He had simply moved on. I thought maybe, she began, but stopped, because there was no sentence that didn't sound pathetic after that. He nodded once, more to himself than to her. This ends tonight. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Good night, Rachel. And just like that, he turned and greeted the next guest. A handshake, a smile, a chuckle about the bar running out of Merlot. The moment cracked like glass behind her, but no one noticed. No one paused. The world didn't shift or rewind or offer her a second shot, because she'd already had it. Years ago. She stood there for a beat longer, unsure whether to step forward again or disappear. She chose wrong. She stayed. Long enough to feel the weight of everyone moving past her. Long enough to see that the man she once underestimated didn't need revenge. He didn't need cruelty. He only needed one thing, distance. And now he had it. The night air hit her like a slap. Too cold for spring. Too quiet for a hotel that had been pulsing with applause just moments ago. She stepped out through the side exit, dazed, blinking against the amber floodlights of the circular drive. Her heels clicked across the pavement like a metronome marking the time she no longer had. She didn't cry. Not yet. The valet, a young man with acne scars and earbuds tucked under his collar, approached her with a small envelope instead of keys. Mrs. Wade? He asked, half certain. Her lips parted slightly. She nodded. He handed it over without fanfare, turned, and returned to his stand. No keys. No smile. No curiosity. Like she was just one more shadow leaving the event too late and too alone. The envelope was unsealed. Cream-colored. Heavy. She opened it under the glow of a street lamp, hands trembling, breath sharp in her nose. Inside was a single card. You gave them a joke. I gave myself a future. No name. No sign-off. No anger. Just a statement. Clipped to the card was a glossy 5x7 photo, taken professionally, with studio lighting and a navy backdrop that matched the Langford logo in the corner. Daniel stood in the center of the frame, flanked by 7 people, all in tailored suits. Smiles, champagne flutes, an easy aura of success that didn't have to prove itself anymore. He looked like someone who had never been laughed at, someone who couldn't be. On his left stood the woman in green. Her dress was different now. Sleek black velvet with a silver pin at the collar, but unmistakable. She wasn't on his arm this time. She was beside him, equal, aligned. And underneath the photo, embossed in silver ink, Langford Holdings, Executive Board, 2025. Daniel Wade, Director of Acquisitions. Ariana Bell, Co-founder, Strategic Development. Co-founder. Not girlfriend. Not date. Partner. She felt her stomach hollow out. A silent drop that hit nothing. The joke she'd made at the party. That stupid, smug line about him being her ex with no degree, no future, wasn't just cruel. It was wrong. Because while she was busy curating punchlines for a room full of people who barely remembered her last name, he had built a legacy. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. And now she was outside it. Permanently. She looked around the parking lot. Almost empty now. A few black cars idling. The echo of distant laughter from the bar inside. The sharp clink of crystal glass against pavement where someone had dropped a flute without caring. She stood there a long time. The wind lifting her hair, the photo trembling slightly in her grip. There were no more words, no more speeches, no one left to hear her apology. Only the sound of her own voice, replaying the moment she'd doomed herself. This is my ex, no degree, no future. And somewhere in her mind, she could still hear them laugh. Her coworkers, her parents, herself. Like hyenas around a carcass they didn't realize could get up and walk away. The building behind her lit up with soft blue uplighting. Inside, Daniel was probably making another toast, or laughing at someone's joke, or maybe not thinking of her at all. That was the worst part. He hadn't needed to destroy her. He had simply outgrown her. Quietly, completely, she looked down at the envelope again, at the photo, at the words that had ended everything. You gave them a joke. I gave myself a future. And finally, she realized she was the punchline, and the crowd had stopped laughing a long time ago.